Hello. Yes, you can hear me. Okay, so like Katrina said in that very kind introduction, we didn't have to fight with the beach for your attention today. So it's ironic given that hospital overcrowding and trolleys is a winter problem. It's like a winter's day out there. So it's no surprise that we believe it's now the year-round crisis. And when I was asked to do this, my first thought, Grace, was of something my dad said to me years ago. I was whining about something. I'm sure it was something really, really inconsequential, something to do with my wedding, possibly shoes, something. And I remember he said to me, Danielle, don't give me problems, give me solutions. And I thought about your attitude to this problem, which I've written about. I started in health journalism in 2006. Like, I've written about it every year. And when I read back about Waterford's record in recent years, it's actually amazing. And I've always said that because I've written about the health service and, you know, it's always a bad news story, but I've always said there's good practice. You know, there's pockets of good practice everywhere, and whether that's due to individual ingenuity or dedication, it obviously always involves collaboration and some sort of, you know, innovation. But it does exist, and we only hear the negative because obviously if it bleeds, it leads, and negative makes news. But we have actually heard very little about Waterford and their record in this regard, and you have been responsible for this. So just to kick off, because I want to give you a moment to gather your thoughts, I actually remembered writing an op-ed for the Daily Mail, of all places, a few years ago, and I was asked to do it, and the reason I did it was because I had a 10-week-old, and when they said it's about the trolley crisis, I said, oh great, I won't have to do any research, I'll just write off the top of my head, because I write this story every year. So I actually wrote, if it wasn't for a very necessary laptop upgrade, I wouldn't have had to write this op-ed. I simply could have copied and pasted last year's article word for word, merely pausing to update the name of the current health minister. I am Bill Murray in Groundhog Day, doomed to report on the same story forever. So far, so Daily Mail. But this is where you've changed the story. I'm no longer a Bill Murray. I'm here to learn all about how you tackled the so-called trolley crisis.
Okay.
So my first question would be, the definition of a trolley wait. I think the general public who maybe don't have direct experience of the hospital system might not fully understand what it means to be on a trolley. They might feel like the patient is still waiting to be seen, to be assessed, to be triaged, whatever it is. So could you give me your definition? Because I think I understand that it's slightly different to what we read about in the papers in terms of the nurses and midwives definition.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
So once somebody is admitted, so either they've been seen and assessed in ED, they're either deemed for admission or discharge. If they're query admission, they're referred to medics or to surgeons who come and see them. Now, so all those stages take time in the ED, and that all depends on volume and a lot of things, day or night. But ultimately then, when they're seen by the medic or the surgeon and they're said for admission, from that time point, they require a bed. So really, technically then from our own, the HSE, if you like, Trolleygar at 8 a.m, 2 p.m. and 8 p.m, anybody that fits that criteria of awaiting admission to a hospital bed, that is the definition of a trolley. The difference with the INMO one is they do a count once a day and it's after 9 o'clock. So to be fair, it could be different to what it was at 8 o'clock. Either some people have got a bed or more have come in for admission. But where things got a bit hairy, I suppose, over the years is people did try to move people from the emergency department, and maybe they moved them to a clinic space that had a curtain perhaps, but was a narrow space, didn't have piped oxygen. So the definition really then, I suppose, expanded to you have to be admitted to a real hospital bed space. So that means a bed, it means a curtain, and it means piped oxygen. It doesn't mean lined up along a corridor on a ward. It doesn't mean stuck in as the 7th bed in a 6-bedded. So when we talk about people on trolleys awaiting admission, they're people who are on trolleys, not in a real hospital bed, who are for admission to a real hospital bed.
Okay, so from my understanding, Waterford, University Hospital Waterford, went the guts of over 3 years, without a patient on a trolley. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, we saw records consistently broken across the health service for these trolley numbers and the trolley counts, you know, month after month, and into the summer months, we've seen this winter problem become a year-round issue that really, I'm assuming, we would think about it, I think, when you read in the news, and I am the news, that you're reading the news, it's about the patient experience must be awful. But actually, it must really stifle the activity of an emergency department, which is already, I assume, a very chaotic place, even at the best of times, which is never the best of times in an emergency department. But would that be fair to say that, because were you in the hospital when there were trolley waits? Like, what was it like before?
Yeah, so I started in January 19. And I suppose over that period of time, it's hard to remember it now, but yes, we did have trolleys. And I spent, I suppose, a lot of time in that first year getting to know people, getting to know how the place works, because every hospital is different. And I think a lot of people mistake this. Like something that's, you fix it with 1, 2, 3 here is not necessarily the same. And from my own perspective, like when you're out working at the front line, either in a hospital or in the community or whatever, we get a lot of diktats from the centre. Somebody decides on this policy and this is what you have to do.
One size fits all.
But it might not necessarily be what you want to do. It mightn't work for you for a variety of reasons. So I spent that first year, I suppose, getting to know, if you like, the good, the bad and the bubbly. And like they're everywhere and they're in every walk of life. And COVID. And to say that COVID, the threat of COVID, it was really the time, I think there was pictures on the news of Italy and army, vehicles, and, we were told to prepare for Italy. It was a phenomenal period of time. But what that did is enabled, it was like a trigger, because literally you went to discharging lots of people. People didn't come to the emergency department. We bought, we rented recliner chairs and found everywhere possible we could put a bed or a chair, and I remember meeting all the physios and the OTs and saying to them, like, we may well need you to be in effect, support the nurses up on the wards, I remember we were talking about theatre then and where we'd ventilate people and, what capacity we had for ventilation, how many ventilators we had, and I remember Vida Hamilton, who you mentioned earlier, I remember her telling us, if you needed a ventilator, you mightn't get one because they'd be trying to save the younger people. So it was a really scary time. But I think that built on getting to know people in your first year, and people are always suspicious of a new manager, and the previous person had been there for a long time. And I was different, I think, because I was out and about. And again, different folks, different strokes, different styles. People would say, what's your management style? I don't really know, to be honest, but, I like to work with people. I think that, in effect, I often say you have to give a bit to get a bit, or I'd say things like little apples. So that means if somebody kind of doesn't really go with you, they will eventually, because they need you, and we all need everybody in the hospital. It's like a little village, So COVID was our trigger point. And the fear in the first instance that was in the system, and everybody really, I suppose, you were heightened on patient safety, but staff safety as well. We all thought we could die. Like this was significant, and March 2020. Then from that day on, the highs and lows of COVID, the highs and lows then of people then post COVID and recovering and getting back to surgery, and like. When you consider all the people that were displaced during COVID, those people are now in the system. And some of them very much missed out on their healthcare during that period of time. So you said about Groundhog Day. Yeah, Groundhog Day is the hospital life. It really is. If it's COVID or flu, or if it's, challenges with oncology, if it's the roads were icy outside, lo and behold, we've a load of fractured hips in, But it is like Groundhog Day on the basis that there are always people in the emergency department. So they always come. They come. It kind of becomes predictable in terms of, the morning wouldn't be bad. After lunch, you'd see people coming. After work, then, 8 o'clock at night, you'd often see people show it on different graphs and things. So it becomes predictable. It becomes predictable by day a week, by total volume on the day. When you know the docs and you know who's on, and again, we get back to that thing, everybody is different. If I'm on, I might admit a couple more than fella that was on yesterday. And again, that's human nature. Nobody's a robot. We're all different. But you can get into predicting the number of beds you actually need every single day to keep the thing ticking over, give or take. You absolutely then have to be able to build in a bit of surge capacity into that. So like in Waterford, we'll say before Wexford now, Wexford Fire has been a different event that happened, you know. But we got into predictability of it. You basically needed a minimum of 50 beds every single day to cater to what came in through the emergency department, and then your overnights from your elective activity, you know, and that's what you needed. Now, if you really were talking on a Friday, you really needed to bring that up to 80, because you don't get, you know, I hear people on about it all the time, about people working 7 days a week and getting 7 days discharge. It's like, I certainly don't agree with that. Like,
you don't agree with it as in it doesn't happen, or?
It couldn't and wouldn't really happen.
Okay.
Like, you know, and in fairness, if you got Saturdays, 6 days a week is probably quite reasonable, because at the end of the day, unless they're going to build us about 10 more hospitals, you know, the throughput, if you were doing that every single day, you won't have enough beds to actually, you won't have enough theatres, you won't have enough diagnostics, but 6 days a week is doable. And I'd say in Waterford, we pretty much did run, you know, we ran a good ship 6 days a week.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm talking a lot now, and I don't know if I answered.
No, but I was saying to you, how, when you realised you needed those 50 beds, say, or whatever, like you were being analytical, and you know, like you said, you can be analytical all you want and run the numbers all you want, but you know, it's people, it's human. So I assume that addressing the trolley weights and addressing, you know, the movement of the beds, it must be a really multi-pronged approach.
Absolutely.
And with collaboration at all levels.
Yeah.
So I presume, and I'm saying that, you need buy-in from everyone.
Everyone.
So how did you achieve that? Like you said about your style and everything. Did you say to everyone, was it a kind of a, you know, Hail Mary moment, like we're going to do this, or was it something that you realised was potentially achievable and you went for it?
See, we were kind of nearly there before COVID, and then COVID gave us the opportunity. And I think every hospital needs a bit of a kickstart, because to be fair, you can't go from one day being, you know, totally overcrowded and everything to the next day been fine. So that gave us our start. Yeah, reset. Yeah. And as I said about COVID, so people really bought into the whole safety. Like you could not have people like lined up on a trolley here, and here in COVID. You just couldn't do it. You shouldn't do it anyway at any time, but certainly not during COVID. The risks were too great. So it became very important. We created a COVID and a non-COVID ED. So we created more space. You know, we had COVID and non-COVID staff in effect. We had streaming at the front door, so people were identified. So whatever, you suppose you actually look at the journey. If somebody arrives by ambulance, this is the thing. If somebody arrives, you know, an elderly person in a chair and somebody wants to stay with them, there's all different types of people that come. So you think of the different types of people: maternity, straight route up; oncology, different route. You know, all these different people across the system, and factor in their safety and the staff, and you're really trying to optimise flow. So we'll say we'll move a little forward from COVID now. So somebody comes to the ED, they'll need an array of tests. Well, first of all, they need space and they need somebody to see them. And a lot of people would say, oh, I was triaged and I had to wait, nobody came to me. That's because people are triaged and then you're seen in order of clinical priority. Now, in Waterford, like in our majors area, there's 13 cubicles. Some hospitals have 8, some have 40. Do you know, so they're all different, you know, if you think about it, and staff. And we got our docs, I suppose, to work till later. And they were happy to do it. Some of them were local, cycled to work, it suited them. So again, different folks, different strokes. Really good nursing team. Really, really good girls that have been there a long time, and boys that have been there a long time. And I suppose for me, the relationship between myself and the director of nursing, as well as the clinical directors in the hospital, was really strong during COVID. I had no deputy at that time, she'd actually just retired. But we worked really well together, and sometimes less is best. You know, sometimes if you have layers and layers of managers, and I'm the one in the office, but I'm a bit removed from. So we had to be out and about. We knew every inch of that hospital. We knew where every bed was. We knocked walls. We created beds where there were never beds, proper ones. You know, we did anything we could, but we turned the physio gym. Remember I said earlier about buying the recliner chairs, like we took over the physio gym in case we needed it. You know, we did different things, very innovative. We put in cubicles in ED if persons that had come in for resus and were COVID. And we did similar up in ICU. ICU used to be an open plan ICU, and literally we did these things over a couple of weekends and things. And we really, it gave us an opportunity because we had the space when we were still waiting for the big wave to come, if you like. We had a bit of time to do things.
Well, people were obviously avoiding hospital at all costs.
Yeah,
at
they
that
were.
time.
They were. They were.
So there were no people on trolleys.
Yeah, but like I didn't solve the trolley crisis in Waterford. The staff in the hospital did, you know.
Okay.
And people are great. I always say it, people are great. You know, I can't do what has to be done in the hospital every day, but so much good is done in every hospital. So much good is done by the entire health service every day. And it is unfortunate in a way that we focus on the trolleys, but I think it's even more unfortunate that it still is the way it is in some places. But there is improvement. But I was so proud of the staff in Waterford. I suppose we had that trigger moment. The standard was there, and we've maintained that standard.
Okay, so after COVID, or even as it kind of ebbed and flowed, people did come back to the hospital. They came back to the emergency departments. It came back, and like we said, broke the records again and again. So when that happened, did you have to change anything in your approach, or was it, like you said, it was in place and it was still working?
Yeah, in place, still working.
Okay.
So we'll say the height of COVID, which would have been, that was March 2020. So early 2021, we had, I think 137 was our highest volume of COVID patients in the house. And when those numbers were rising, there was a new block had been built in Waterford, the Dunmore wing. There's five floors in it. The top 3 are for the acute hospital, 3 by 24 single rooms, 72 single rooms. The bottom 2, one is for like outpatient day cases for Southeast Palliative Care, and the basement was 20 single rooms for palliative care, but they hadn't moved in at the time. And we were saying, this is fantastic. We'll never need more than the 324s and the 20, but we did. We overflowed out into the main hospital. I mean, it was just phenomenal. But like that, people just, whatever we had to do, it was done. So when COVID eased, you had to get back to normal business. I mean, you have to remember at this stage we'd had done like very little surgery. We had moved all of our oncology out to the private hospital, and again, the sole reason for that was to mind those patients who were particularly vulnerable. And then you see, and things start to ease, people are saying, oh yeah, you sent us out here, but we want to come back, you know. And some people had to come back. And to this day, people are still playing catch up. So a bit like Groundhog Day, you do the same thing every day. You go in at 7 in the morning, you get the handover from night sister. She tells you who's in, who's out, what went on during the night. And the flow, the rhythm of the day starts ward by ward, round by round, you know, whatever it is. And I suppose post-COVID, if you like, when things settled and you really started to see big volume numbers and you were thinking, we'll never get through today. But you do. And we'll never get through tomorrow. But over that time, you start to look at the other pieces that make the day run. It could be diagnostics, you know, what's wrong in MRI or CT, or could we get more echoes done, or varying things. Why is the nursing home down the road not taking people? So you start to look at all the steps along the way and all the hurdles, and really find a solution to them. Like, nothing is impossible, and for every single thing there is a solution to it. But it is about, if you say to, you know, if I was able to say to you know, to Orla Kavanagh, what's going on in Medical 3? They've no discharges. Somebody will sort that, you know. Like, when you're in the hospital, it just consumes your entire life. And, you know, people at home now would probably say that about me, but, like, I got to the stage that you'd know every patient, give or take. You'd know who they were, you'd know the names, you'd certainly know the ones that are there a long time. You'd know the people on the list coming in for chemo. You just get to know all of these people, and I suppose some, for some reasons or another, come to your particular attention, either families or politicians and different things. And, you know, it's a very worrying time for people. People are very, very heightened. But I suppose I always feel, and you know, you could argue I'm biased, but I always feel that people genuinely do their best. Nobody gets up at the start of any day and sets out to do harm, you know. They get up at the start of the day, they have who knows what they have at home. People have their own lives, you know, outside of work. But I firmly would believe people come to work to do their best.
Well, I feel like people in the health service would have said that, you know, no matter their own ambition or, you know, desires, the system is like works against them, and that would be kind of a common refrain. So you're saying you changed the system. The system kind of adapted to...
Tweak the system.
Tweaked the system so that you're all have the same common goal and you're actually making the moves to achieve it. Now, I have to ask, you mentioned the Dunmore wing, but that was empty. So, like, I mean, you really had this block of other beds that maybe another hospital didn't have. Did that help, or was that...
We'd opened before COVID.
Yeah.
A couple of the wards, I think, and then we could use the rest. So the advantage there for COVID was the single room capacity. So we would have had very little single rooms on the other side of the house. You'd only kind of have 3 or 4 single rooms too.
So it helped the COVID problem rather than the trolley problem. Because the COVID problem could have totally compounded the trolley problem at a certain point.
Could have done.
Yeah.
So I suppose when COVID came, as I said, we had loads of beds. I can't remember now, but we probably had a couple of hundred empty beds. So, you know, they slowly filled for different reasons or whatever. But we managed just as things came back on stream and more work. And we did control, like, and I mean, I suppose the hospital would be criticised, I suppose, in a sense for... So what do you do if, you know, this particular day you only manage to get X number of discharges, you have a big elective list tomorrow, you know what's going to come in overnight. So you would have rang through people that were coming in for scheduled surgery and say, listen, night super will ring you in the morning, or please ring at 7:30, you know, and you would wind up cancelling some. You would. Because I always said that... well, I suppose the premise we worked on, and the standard was, we weren't going to have people waiting for admission in the ED. So give or take, you know, the volume there. So they took precedence, they did. And somebody that could have been waiting for, like, a cataract or, you know, some of those...
They had to get bumped, basically.
They were bumped on occasion,
yeah.
They were, because we don't have the capacity. And I always said to the surgeons, and the surgeons work with you because they see what you're trying to do. But if you wind up cancelling their surgeries 2 days a week or whatever, they start getting a bit edgy. But like, again, then your job then is to get the place to move so you can get them in the next day. But like, you can't keep admitting people, because if there's nowhere to admit them to, you just perpetuate the problem. And to me, that makes the place unsafe.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so like there is and you know, I mean, that's the thing about the Irish Health Service. We run at kind of dangerously high levels of capacity the whole time. What's the optimum capacity? Is it something like...
They say you should be at 85%.
85%.
Yeah.
And aren't we at something like 103 or...
Yeah,
do you know, so I appreciate that in terms of the patient safety aspect. And yeah, I can see a lot of people waiting for elective surgeries being very disappointed and surgeons being tetchy, all right, but I get what you're saying in terms of there has to be, and like all solutions are probably imperfect too.
Yeah, and like 7 days out of 10 we wouldn't cancel. But when you get into a bad space, for whatever reason, you could have had a C. diff outbreak, so that slows down. You could have outbreaks in nursing homes, so it slows down what goes out. You know, it depends.
When you talked about discharges, you know, and I mean, when I started off, like, it's something you can't say now, but the bed blockers, remember the headlines, the bed blockers, and it was all about you couldn't get people out of beds. And how's like, you're working in the community now, and I'm not going to ask you about that, but more about, like, what's the flow out of the hospital in terms of the discharges? Like, was that an issue? Because when I talk about it being a multi-pronged, I mean, it's actually having somewhere for them to go, obviously.
Yeah.
And not in all cases, it's not...
So, and that was another thing I suppose I did in Waterford. I can't remember which year now, but you know, we used to have a winter plan because in theory things were worse in the winter. It's the same all year round, really. And I suppose the thing about the winter is, I suppose, with the bad weather, people's, you know, respiratory illness, and equally maybe slips, trips, falls and orthopedics. But what was the question now? Discharges.
About the discharges and the community and the flow.
So, like, you have to have an estimation in your head. I need to get this number of discharges a day. So there will be people medically well every single day of the week. There will, every single day. What we were calling the bed blockers, delayed transfers of care, we call them now. So they would be people who have their...
I know that there's like that's a dinosaur term, and that just shows how long I'm in the game. And like, I know you actually can't say that now. Yeah. It's like verboten. I didn't say it.
They will be people, if you like, whose acute episode of care is finished. So they may well be for a nursing home. They may be for convalescence. they may be for rehab. You know, there's a whole array of people. And nowadays, actually, there's a whole different cohort of people, like with Ukrainians, with homelessness, mental health. There's a whole array of issues. So the acute hospital is very dependent on, I suppose, services outside the acute hospital. So yeah, community primarily. And the community do phenomenal work. It's a very broad service, if in effect, when you think about it, like it's everything outside the hospital. So it's phenomenal: health and well-being, mental health, disability, older persons. I mean, it's traveller health. It's massive social inclusion. But at the same time, and I would say, and I'm in the community now, I was in the hospital, it's a different pace. Like acute is 24/7. It has to be done. Things are just a little bit slower, I would say, in the community, but people do some phenomenal work out there too. And the health service is moving towards a new arrangement that will see hospitals and community very much more aligned, working together, you know, under the one umbrella. Because to date, it's very much been never the twain shall meet. You know, I'm speaking for the Southeast, and that was never a deliberate
Were you
thing.
saying, as much as in the hospital, you were like, right, can you walk, go, you know, and then the community weren't ready to take them because maybe they were operating at a slightly different pace and the urgency isn't there.
Yeah, and I suppose in the same way that acutes would say we don't have capacity, like community capacity is tight too. So that's what I was saying, one of those winter plans, what I looked for was actually recurring funding to have an SLA with the nursing home down the road from the hospital. So it would help us with our flow, a service level agreement. So if we needed people, we had a lot of people, because we had orthopaedics, you have an older generation, lots of slips, trips, falls, lots of hips, lots of people needing rehab. And to be fair, like people are entitled to go home. Home should always be, you know, destination home should always be the starting point. But it doesn't become everybody's.
To get everyone down to the lowest level of care, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. People are entitled to go home. So if they needed that couple of weeks extra, that we couldn't keep them in the hospital, you know, they weren't necessarily rehab, they weren't going to be for nursing home, you know, that really helped us as well. And that's still going to this day. So we had beds with Care Choice in Dungarvan, we had beds with Signacare in Bunclody, and with Signacare in Ferrybank, and that works to this day.
So you're saying you picked up the phone?
Yeah.
And you made sure that they were there?
Yeah.
See, that's what I think is what we're trying to get to here. Like, it's the, just even thinking of making that call and it's building the relationships, and it's having the whole system kind of, you know, working in step with each other.
So I've worked in health now since 1994, so I kind of know it, and it's amazing. Like, I'm still learning.
Kind of an Irish solution to an Irish problem, because you're like, hi, you know me, let's do this. You know, and it's, we're small enough that you know, and there's so many layers of bureaucracy. I completely appreciate that. But like the interpersonal relationships obviously do count for a huge amount still,
And like every day, you know, and I suppose how do you make work has to be fun too, you know. The lads in the hospital said they miss me shouting up the corridor now, and I would have been shouting names rather than giving out now or anything.
Yeah.
But, you know, every single day you have to have a bit of fun, but every single day there's a new problem of some description, and there's always a solution. You know what I mean? Somebody's going home, so, you know, they needed whatever they needed, you know, God, if you can help them, do it, you know what I mean, rather than say, oh, they do that or they do that. We really tried to help ourselves, and in so doing, I suppose, help patients and help the next patient that needs to come in, because I always think that, like, there's the number that are waiting to come in are way bigger than what you have. That number is, probably nobody actually really knows that number, you know, and we'll all be part of that number.
As in the people who truly need care at any given moment, Yeah. I was going to ask, I think one of the main, my opinion, is that one of the main problems facing healthcare and it's a global problem, lack of staff.
Correct.
And we have obviously this huge movement of staff, Irish trained nurses and doctors moving out of the system, staff coming from elsewhere, but just this shortage, these gaps, you know, maternity leave can really impact a single department, you know. What else? The lack of consultants, you know, we've like the consultant contract, like all this stuff I've been writing about for years. It's really, I can see it all kind of the perfect storm where all the issues are coming together. There actually aren't, there are staffing crises. Was that an issue you had to face, or is it something you can see getting worse, or what's been your experience of that?
I'd agree with you wholeheartedly on the staff, and I like even in community now. Most recently, when I looked at it across the southeast in the community setting, we're short 60 physios, 40 OTs, 40 SLTs, 30 dietitians. The list goes on and on. Therapists,
This is what's needed, or what's happening?
Yeah, they're funded posts that are vacant at the moment.
Right.
So we've had a lot of new initiatives. I suppose a lot of them under the umbrella of Sláinte Care. So you're told you can do this pathway, and there's this post, that post, the other post. The people are not there to fill those posts.
That's what I'm talking about. Yeah.
In the hospital, you would constantly run at a rate of vacancy, but you're constantly trying to recruit. And in actual fact,
Not only recruit, but retain.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And actually, we'll get to that. I did a lot of that as well. Recruitment.
Told them they couldn't leave, was it?
Yeah, they didn't want to leave. But recruitment has to be ongoing as well. So, like when you're anywhere really outside Dublin, Cork, Galway, they're the big hospitals. They're the real ones that people go to work in. They're where the universities are. So, somewhere Waterford is probably the next tier of that in terms of attracting
being a teaching
people.
hospital and getting the experience they want and need. Yeah.
But you make the place more attractive. People will come. Like orthopedics, very successful in Waterford. Always was. There was. Some of the now retired orthopaedic surgeons were very involved in sports medicine and things like that, and people liked them, looked up to them, trained with them, and then they come. I suppose in my time, we had a lot of people, medicine changed too. I suppose back years and years ago, it was the GP's son went to be the next GP. But I think more and more and different type people went into medicine. Yeah. And the chap from the bottom of Tipperary or the chap from out Mooncoin did medicine. And then he thought, I'll come back to, And what I found we did deliberately was we would have recruited husbands and wives. So,
that's really good strategy, yeah.
Yeah.
Then they put down roots, the kids are in school, they don't want to, I get it.
Well, when they come to meet you and you say, and what does your husband or what does your wife do? And they say, so even most recently, actually, we've a new gastroenterologist, and she was his fiancée at the time, and she was in the Mater. And she was critical care outreach, and I was saying to him, would she come? And he was saying, she'll come. And I got the director of nursing to ring her one day, and she had no intention of coming, But she did come since. She did come. But it is about, like I made the comment about the village earlier, and it is like a village, and it is about people knowing people, and a lot of the docs went to school, went to college together, and they found each other back over time. But when it's a nice place to work, people will come.
So I suppose then when doctors, are doing their rotations, they probably enjoy their time there maybe. And is that what you're talking about when you talk about just building that kind of atmosphere and the collegial kind of approach where they feel they're part of something? Yeah, and they feel this place is good, and this place is fun. You have to have fun every day. Other than that, why would anyone go to work, But you have to have, I couldn't imagine going into a place that you actually hated going into. And I can imagine the pressures in some places. And don't get me wrong, we were under pressure all sorts of days, and you would have people fighting. But people calm down and you get over that hurdle and you meet the next one. Yeah. But it is about energy, and it's about effort, like it is Groundhog Day. It really is. And a lot of people would say it's not sustainable. But I just think for every problem, there is a solution. Okay. But it is people that make the health service. So it's not that you've made it sound easy, but you've definitely given us a good flavour of the steps you've taken at every level. But I was curious for my nosy questions. I have the proper questions and I've got nosy questions. Did any manager from another hospital ring you up and say, well, what are you doing? How can I do it? Yes or no? They did. Yeah, so... And some came. Some came, right? Yeah. And those that came, they've done things. They've done things you've seen, okay. Okay, and do you think, is it some stuff was Waterford only, or some stuff was more applicable more widely and scale, you're not sure? I'd say now if I said lots of things here and that's what I'm trying to get to. This is where the journalist is coming out. But you see, different people have different priorities too, and that's what I'm saying. You couldn't have two hospitals in the country that are the same size. So their hospital is their own beast. And, and
I would think a lot of what we do in Waterford is transferable, absolutely. Like, things are transferable. And other places did come and work with us for a few days and ask questions, and they have applied those things and they've done very well. Like, other places, it's hard to explain it, I suppose, really. Like, Waterford has maternity, orthopaedics, ED, oncology all on the one site. I think we're the only hospital that has.
Okay.
Other Model 4s might have a separate maternity build, or, you know, not every hospital is a cancer centre, not every place does orthopaedics. So it's hard to know.
It's a slightly unique place.
Yeah,
okay.
But like, I knew the house, I knew what beds we had, you know, and again, look at, ours is not perfect by any manner of means. You know, we would have had mixed gender wards. Like I say, we would have cancelled elective surgery, delayed day cases. You know, we weren't the perfect either. So, like, there are hospitals that rock with their elective activity and their day cases, but they might have trolleys, whereas we did no trolleys. Now, on saying that, we did reduce our outpatient waiting list by 15% in the last couple of years. We do very well on elective cases, but of course we could do better. But arguably, you could say we need more theatres to do better, and there is things coming now. So the good news for Waterford, I suppose, is that the effort has paid off, in that they're getting one of those modular theatres, which will be great to actually be able to have a cohort of beds that we wouldn't use, because, you know, no matter what, I would have said we use the bed.
So
like,
they'd be ring-fenced for
they'd
surgery.
because they're going to be across the road, so we wouldn't be able to use them. But like, even if, it's hard to explain this, I would have used every single bed.
Okay,
whatever
so
bed
nothing was off limits.
Nothing was off limits. Whereas I know other hospitals would never in a million years use this bed. I'd use every bed. Now, we would have had, even during COVID, and you know, you work a lot with your microbiology and infection prevention and control teams, and they'd always say, close the ward, close the ward. You know, I'd be saying, we cannot close the ward because you'd have people in ED. But you'd cohort people, you might have the ward, you might put up screens, separate the staff, use disposable stuff.
Workaround solutions. Okay.
Workarounds, yeah.
Okay,
every
so I want to know, did you ever get any credit for it? Did the HSE ever come down and slap you on the back and say, well done? I'm guessing no. Yeah?
No, they did.
Okay.
They did. Yeah.
But
I'd say they all think I'm a bit mad, like, you know.
Yeah, because, like, you know, the HSE is such a... And, like, it's going to be, like, there's going to be this massive reorganisation, like you said, and this move towards community and everything. But, you know, there's people that would argue, like, did the HC make the health board, kind of going back to the health board, sort of, you know, and it's a funny one. I mean, they're obviously talking about, like, it's not a winter problem anymore, but now they're even talking about longer term plans, like 3 to 5 year plans. What do you think of that? Like, are they looking at you when they're drawing up this 3 to 5 year plan? That's what I want to know.
Yeah.
You don't.
They're trying to... you see, like, I'm involved actually in the urgent and emergency care plan now, I suppose, from where I work at the moment, you know, and involvement with the hospitals. And I'm working with the 4 hospitals now from a community perspective, Kilkenny, Wexford, Waterford and South Tipperary. But, you know, like, I don't know, I'm not a great believer in 3 to 5 year plans, because today is where you're at. You know, you have to have a bit of, okay, you have to get to today, to the weekend, to the end of the year. But, you know, like, health, it's so fluid and it's so different. Like, nobody saw COVID come until it came. You know what I mean?
No.
Things
so
just
you can
happen.
draw out the best plan in the world, then you can rip it up.
Like, nursing homes close very quickly. Different things happen that changes the pattern. But fundamentally, like there's ingredients that every single day are needed regardless of what's coming on. And one of those is, you know, someone has to be in charge. And I would arguably say maybe that's a little bit missing in some places. You know, people are people.
Leadership.
We're not robots. Different people, different styles, you know. So somebody has to be in charge. You have to know who's in the house. I always say that, know who's in the house. And what I mean by that is, are there people that actually could be gone home, but they're forgotten about in the mix? And, you know, again, arguably, I would say when you are overwhelmed, when your system is overwhelmed, where you have people in emergency departments, excess beds on the ward, people are forgotten. And again, it's not a deliberate, you know, staff become so overwhelmed, stressed, burnt out. You only have a certain capacity every day. Like, even I have to sleep, you know. But, like, people are tired. People are very tired post-COVID. This whole, it's like It's Groundhog Day. It's Groundhog Day.
Okay.
It takes huge effort. It takes people to
And what about
come in every day.
maintaining that momentum? And
So we did a lot of health and well-being stuff in Waterford, you know.
For the staff?
Yeah, we did loads of things. And even during COVID, we did loads of competitions. Like, I might have taken pictures of 6 shoes, you know, around the house during the day, and you'd put them up and say who owns the shoes, you know, and there was a prize. And it was great crack, you know. We did funny things like ties, or I remember asking some of the docs, and you're from Waterford, so you know some of the docs, but I got their baby pictures. That was really good now. But people
so bringing
enjoy
the kind
it.
of the pub quiz into
and
the
you know,
word,
we might have done Costa in the lobby, we might have done free coffee on a Friday. We got a lot of local Waterford businesses to come in on every second Friday into one of the car parks. So there's a gentleman in Tremor, is it Emiliano? No, Adriano's Pizzas and stuff.
Okay.
And they would have come, and we'd have a food fair every second Friday.
Okay,
You'd buy your own now, you know, it wasn't that the hospital paid for it.
Yeah, but just have the
it was
option.
there and a little bit of fun. So different things. And we never managed to do our COVID night out, which is a regret. We always said we'd do a big barbecue out in Jack Meads, but no matter when we thought we'd do it, there was a bubble about COVID. You know, nobody wanted to be the ones that, because imagine we were all out at the party, you know.
No, you had to really wait till the end. Okay. So I actually live quite near Jack Meads, which is this big open air pub, so I will gate crash that party. Well, I was going to say, so remind everyone, what's the catchment area of Waterford Hospital?
Yeah, it's about 530,000
right?
now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, Wexford General Hospital.
Yeah,
Just as you left, there was a huge fire. You probably all saw this, and that put Wexford out of action to
It did. Put Wexford out of action.
Basically.
Yeah, it did.
And Waterford has had to absorb, for the most part, Waterford has been the one to absorb the so that has probably massively increased that catchment area all of a sudden, and the ED has surely been under pressure as a result. I've seen there's a tent outside now because there's that many people.
So again, that is typical now. So I was there the night.
So there's your 3 to 5.
I was there the day of the,
anyway. Yeah.
I was there the day of the Wexford fire, and like 37 people came by ambulances that evening. And like when we rang, and we were thinking now genuinely. I remember being on telecoms that day, thinking, say nothing now, just say nothing. Do you know what I mean? Because you could say send them all up to us, but you have to think in your own house, who have we got, where are we going to put them, what are we going to do? But like over the course of a few hours, we did discharge, and we thought what we could do, and we could do this, and of course. We put our hands up and said send them up. So patients did go to Vincent's, to Kenny and ourselves, but like of the volume they had inpatients that day, an awful lot were discharged and went home. But we took all those patients that night, and we managed very well probably for a couple of weeks, but then our numbers, like phenomenal now, what went up. But we got the tent up in 2 days. You know, we knew they were coming, we knew the volume.
This is not, I'm not talking about, it's not like a more
it's a big
setting, like it is quite,
it's probably as big as
structure,
this.
It's a structure.
So why did we do that? Because space is everything. So your waiting area, no matter what, anywhere, like the more people you have on top of one another, it just all gets messy. So it was more to create space. And we equally, post-COVID, we had an ED modular build that was coming to give us more cubicles, if you like. It's all a bit complicated, but I suppose the simple version is during COVID, we created a second ED. So we had COVID and non-COVID. Non-COVID was actually in a ward. So we needed to get that ward back, and we were waiting for a build outside to replace it. And as luck would have it, I think it was the week before the Wexford fire, we had that ward back open. So we happened to, somebody was looking down on us somewhere. So we had those beds, but we did need more waiting space. So we got that tent marquee up outside, which was heavily criticised on the airwaves below. You know, it's too hot, it was too cold, and in fairness, the hot days it would have been hot. But you know, you get fans and you leave doors open, and you figure it out. You figure it out. But the numbers, like we would have in Waterford on Monday to Friday here to 200, 220 in the ED. Post Wexford, like it has been up to 280, 300. You'd average, maybe 40, 45 ambulances a day. There was 64 ambulances in Waterford last Sunday. So that's phenomenal pressure on the hospital. And they did have a couple of extra beds up on the wards, but they had beds on the wards as against trolleys in ED. So I would have at the time made the decision to suspend returns on Trolleygar, and I did that intentionally, and we got under a lot of pressure to do it, and why are you not doing it? So I said we're not doing it because, to be fair, like you hear about it every year, they compare and contrast from, 1975, 82, 90, it goes on and on. You'll hear it all the time. You're up, down or sideways from last year. So I said when Wexford returns to normal and our volume goes down to normal, because to be fair, everything you have, the resource you have is to a certain level. It's back to bin the numbers. We knew what we could manage every single day. And we knew we couldn't. Yeah. Now, we actually managed really, really well with Wexford, but it took a bit of time.
Will that go on? Because it's going to be another...
Tuesday coming, they're opening their ED. Okay. So there will be a number. Now there'll be a certain cohort that'll stay and want to stay, but it will reopen on Tuesday. But I suppose in the intervening period, there was a closed ward opened in Kilkenny that we were able to, move Wexford patients to till they were ready. So different things happened that supported us as well. But the outpatient waiting list in the hospital for the first time in nearly 2 years in Waterford has gone up because of the Wexford patients. So people have come into the system, they're now seeing the docs. So, it's amazing. And that's what I'm saying, who would have predicted any of that would have happened? But at the end of the day, I suppose, again, the volume of people that do receive good care, in every place, is a credit to the staff in the Irish health system. Now, there's bad experiences too, don't get me wrong, and, these things happen as well, and you have to do your best to try and sort any of those issues and work with people. But again, it's people, and people, I'm not the solution to the trolley crisis. It's actually teamwork, people, and really, I suppose, it's about having a passion for it though as well. You know what I mean? Like we would often say in Waterford, like, can you imagine the pressure you would be under if you had all of this going on as well? So when we didn't have the pressure of trolleys, I suppose you can work on something else. But yeah, and you have to have a laugh, I always say, yeah.
Okay, that's a good point to end on. Yeah. Yeah, it's very optimistic note. It's
10 minutes left, so maybe you'd like to go to the audience.
I think we should take some questions. I'm not quite sure, like maybe there's people here that work in healthcare or have a direct experience of the hospital system. Does anyone have a question? And are there roving mics, are there? Oh, you have a roving mic here? Oh, yeah. Somebody have a question? Oh, that gentleman there in the middle, just there. If you want to introduce yourself.
Yeah, my name's Kieran Loftus. I used to work in various public sector environments. And I'm fascinated to hear the exemplary style of change management that you've been leading. What's also troubling me is, not troubling me, but making me curious, is that you've never used the word tell, and you haven't talked about vested interests. And pick up any article about the healthcare system in Ireland, and indeed in the UK, where I've also worked. And what you come across vested interests. And you end up with confrontation or fights of one sort or another. And I'm absolutely fascinated that that's not what you focused on at all. And I also wonder, how would that scale? And if you try to apply that sort of soft change management approach across the system, how far you'd get?
Yeah, good question. And I suppose I will admit now that sometimes on a day-to-day, and I think I used the phrase earlier, give a bit to get a bit, so we might have had cardiologists giving out, they want to do this or this, and, you might meet them some little bit of the journey and you get them to work with you on something else, and down the line you'll do that.
So there was confrontation?
Yeah, well, sure, people I suppose, yeah, the cardiologist just wants to be in the cath lab, the surgeon just wants to be in theatre, but it is about getting people to work with you. And, when you create space, I suppose, in the hospital, it's a much wants more. But we always worked on making that space. So if the cardiologist wanted X, Y, Z, I might say, well, make sure then you discharge patients, And cardiologists actually, as a particular, we wound up getting them actually in every single day of the week, and we wound up lifting up our discharges at weekends due to cardiologists being in the hospital, and then that gave them more space to get in more patients. So everything is connected. So it's about maybe getting people to realise that they're not just out there, doing their own thing, wanting to see their own patients. They have to be part of a system, and everybody, every cog in that wheel has to kind of work together. And it does. There's the odd hiccup, but you get back on track. I hope that answers your
What
question.
about the scalability?
The scalability. Now, a lot of people would say what I did and what we do in Waterford is not sustainable. You know, it takes huge work every single day. And it does, you know, I don't know what it's like to work a 35 or a 39-hour week. I have no idea. But I've never done that, you know, and I know that doesn't make, you know, who's right, who's wrong, you know, arguably. And maybe when we talked earlier about staffing challenges, and I think the newer generation that, you know, we've seen it already coming in, you know, you don't get the orthopaedic surgeon of years ago who would have lived in the hospital. You know, people are changing, circumstances changing, so it's a very good question. I don't have the answer to that. Yeah.
Anybody else? No one else? Oh, sorry, who? There, oh, sorry. The lights are blinding me down here. Thank you.
Jackie Cran, I currently work within the HSC after working in the private sector for a number of years. I could talk to you all day, just really about your commitment and energy and focus, and you're such a human, to make sure that you delivered what you delivered and dedicated most of your life, I'd say, to that as well. So I applaud you about that. But there's so many things that you mentioned today, little triggers that helped, including the people that you worked around. But I wanted to ask you, because you didn't mention it and you didn't really elaborate, is before people come to the ED, before they're admitted, did you have any good collaboration, say, with the GPs? So, or how did you keep people away who did not need to come to the ED? Because in my own experience, that is something that we need to be better at. And I'm not saying it's all around education either. It's about more collaborative work with the community, of course. But I think that must have been important for you as well. And I'm wondering, what sort of processes did you come up with that was able to help that?
Very good question, and that's probably the next body of work for every hospital. We wouldn't have had huge engagement with GPs. We had a GP was a member of our executive management team, and he would have worked well with us, but he would be coming to us saying he was as much under pressure as we were. We did small things with bloods and enabled them access bloods and, you know, anything. I remember that all the local practices were saying, is there any chance of a taxi to collect samples to bring them into E so we get the results quicker, and we did simple things like that. But no, very good point. Badly needs to be done. I suppose the secret, and it is true to say that a huge, well, I don't know what the percentage would be now, but in Waterford we'd only convert about 22% of what comes. Other hospitals convert more. And again, the reasonings behind that are multifaceted. They can be different docs, more acutely unwell, population, whatever
People
it
coming
is.
from elsewhere kind of thing, yeah.
Yeah, so that was a big thing for us in Waterford too, because the minute you'd see that 22% increase, and you'd look to see why. So people can't get access to GPs. That's a fact.
I actually had that in my
Yeah. That's a fact. But we've a really good minor injuries unit in the hospital, all run by ANPs, fabulous girls. So at a point in time that might have only run 9 to 5, that now works kind of 8 to 8, and we'd love to actually move that to 10 o'clock at the weekends now. So again, it's about adjusting. Paediatric assessment unit as well used to be a day unit, that now runs right through till 10 o'clock on a weeknight, and similarly the weekend. So whatever the issue is, you know, you're dead right. You have to, and once you sort one piece of the puzzle, you look at the next piece, you know, and it's amazing how it works. It really is. And there's so many pieces to a health system. Like, if somebody said to me, could you write out, I remember they asked me to write out how you do what you do. And I did write 3 pages off the top of my head, but you could write 33 pages, you know, because it's just, depends, yeah.
I remember reading, you know, before that, you know, that it's not the big changes, it's the incremental changes that actually make the difference in the end, isn't it? So you're saying you just did lots of small things maybe that working together.
Of small things, yeah. And you do try to look after everybody as well, because a bit to the gentleman's point there, you know, yeah, it is true to say, like, the orthopaedic surgeon, he only wants to do orthopaedic surgery, you know, he really does. You know, it's everybody's, but equally we have that volume of people that need to come in. So we would have moved orthogeriatrics up to Kilcreen, which is a hospital that was elective, and you know, that kind of, the orthopaedics were delighted with that, because then they have 6 beds there that they can work
actually...
to. So you kind of give a bit to get a bit, yeah.
Okay. Do we have another question there? Yeah? Hi.
Thanks. There was a fantastic talk. Curious, in your new role, what are you most excited about in terms of improving community care? You know, where do you think you can make the biggest changes, be it in the southeast or, you know, nationally? Like, where could we do better?
I really think that I was one of the offenders that would have felt, you know, community are not responsive enough. You know, I do think there is huge opportunity for the hospitals to work better with community, and not necessarily about moving stuff out of the hospital, but more about working together again. You know, like, who's to say really that maybe dermatology shouldn't lock, stock and barrel be delivered in the community? Like, why, you know, I think again there's opportunity to look at every single specialty. So already there's pathways in place for certain things, heart failure, COPD, diabetes, things like that, all around the country. Some more developed than others. Again, multifaceted reasoning, could be space, could be the type of individual got the job. Some people got a 50-50 consultant, some didn't. Because again, it's not about a one-size-fits-all. But I think there's big opportunity in the southeast for the 4 hospitals and all the staff in those, and the excellent colleagues in community as well, who all do really exciting things, most of which I don't even know yet. I'm 3 months in post in my new job on Monday next. Yeah, is that right? And you know, I probably the standout moment so far was substance misuse, and I heard that the staff had a team of service users and they were bringing a garden to bloom. So I went down, and again, to see it was in Clonmel, and as a kind of a default from COVID, they got themselves a nice little modular unit. They had been literally in one room, in a corner, down somewhere, and because of COVID, when the hospital said, right, we need you out, they got this thing. And a phenomenal CNM2 there, ably assisted by some staff, some volunteers, and they have potatoes out the back, they have vegetables, they have tomatoes, they have sunflowers, and she had about 13 people on the books coming to her, all from Clonmel, some of them homeless, you know, and they did bring their garden to bloom, and absolutely phenomenal achievement.
That's fantastic,
and, you know, there are things like that.
Like I said, those pockets of excellence.
Everywhere, every day, we don't hear half it. So yeah, so opportunity to do more of that.
Okay, anybody else, or can't see, can anyone?
Somebody up there, is it?
Was there someone up there?
You would be a great minister for health.
Get the mic, just get the mic. You'll have to laugh again.
What?
You would be a great minister for health. What would you do if you got the job?
Listen to the people at the front line.
Right. That's a really good note to finish up on, I think. Just on time, maybe 3 minutes late. Thanks so much for everyone for coming today, Grace.
Yeah,
thank you for speaking to me. Thanks for asking me to come and do the event. And yeah, that was great. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks so much. You hear things at first thought that you don't hear anywhere else, and I am very proud that we got this fantastic woman here today to tell us how to do things properly, something that we seem to fail at a lot of the time. And that mixture of compassion and efficiency that she's demonstrated has moved me intensely. I feel really optimistic now about the possibilities for our health service after hearing how certain things can be done. And I want to thank Grace and to thank Danielle for doing such a great job of interviewing her. Next weekend, we will have Dr. Martin Curley, for those of you who are interested in health matters, who's the man who tried to establish a digital records program for the HSE and found himself very seriously obstructed. So this will be the opposite of what you've heard this morning. It's going to be very annoying, and it'll give us all a chance for some recreational outrage, which is always good for the spirit. But this morning, we can leave on a note, I think, of genuine optimism after hearing what Grace had to say. Thank you all for coming. Enjoy the rest of the evening.
Thanks, William.